This week, the Supreme Court questioned just how far a president can stretch the word emergency, and a federal judge ordered ICE to fix dangerous conditions in one of its detention centers, and the shutdown is now the longest in U.S. history, and it's cutting into food aid. Over the next few minutes, we'll talk about what the law actually allows, why it matters, and what to watch before Monday. So let's start with the Supreme Court. On Wednesday, the justices heard arguments in a case that, on the surface, is about tariffs. But what it's really about is power. Earlier this year, the White House used a 1977 law called the International Emergencies Economic Powers Act to impose sweeping tariffs. I'm sure you remember Liberation Day, right? They said it was necessary for national security. But here's the thing. The law was written for unusual and extraordinary threats like war, terrorism, or economic sabotage from abroad, not for reshaping global trade policy on a whim. And Congress is the branch of government that's supposed to control trade. That's in Article 1. The power to tax, to regulate commerce, to set the terms. So now the court is being asked, did Congress give away too much of its power? And can a president just declare an emergency and sideline the legislative branch? If the court draws a new line here, it won't just be about tariffs. It'll be about every time a president reaches for emergency powers to bypass the usual rules, especially in situations that affect the economy. Because the question is, when does urgency become its own loophole? And while that plays out in theory, something else happened this week that's a lot more concrete. A federal judge, Robert Gettleman, issued an emergency order requiring ICE to fix serious issues at its Broadview detention facility in Illinois. The reports coming out of there were grim, like people being held without beds, no clean toilets, limited access to food, water, and hygiene items, and maybe most alarming to myself, no way to speak privately with a lawyer. The court didn't just criticize ICE, it gave them until Friday to make changes, with a follow-up hearing scheduled for November 19th, and that includes the shocking notion of keeping a public log so detainees aren't lost in the system. The audacity to tell a federal agency that they can't just disappear people into the system in America. My God. And what that means is, I hope, due process still matters. At least here and at least for now. Because in this country, your basic rights aren't supposed to disappear just because you are behind a locked door. Especially the right to legal counsel. That's not optional. That's foundational. And then there's the shutdown. We crossed the line this week. It's now the longest shutdown in American history. But beyond the record books, something deeper cracked too. The USDA announced it'll use contingency funds to partially cover November's SNAP benefits. Some states are trying to close the gap, but others can't. This is food for families. And when Congress can't fund the basics, it doesn't just feel like dysfunction, it feels like a breakdown of responsibility. Because if lawmakers control the purse, but the purse stays closed, where does that leave the people? So, what's next? If it stays on schedule, the October jobs report drops Friday morning. That's wages, hiring, unemployment, and it could shift political pressure on both sides of the shutdown fight. And then on Monday, the Supreme Court is back and they'll hear Landor v. Louisiana. That's a case that asks whether prisoners can sue officials for violating their religious rights under federal law. And GEO Group v. Menocal, where the court will decide whether private detention contractors can immediately appeal when a judge denies them government-like immunity. And that ruling could determine how fast or if abuse cases ever reach trial. And tucked into the docket is a case about the President and the National Guard. Filings are due Monday in Trump v. Illinois, and this is a very high-stakes battle over whether the president can seize control of state guard units. That is federalism on the brink. So yeah, a lot is moving. Some of it is loud and some of it is easy to miss. But what gets decided this week could reshape who holds power and who gets protected. There are sources and links in the description, and if you want more breakdowns like this one, subscribe or head to my website, dancoyle.com. The link should be here on screen somewhere, and there's tons of additional content there. So in closing, let me ask you this. Which of these turning points matters most to you, and why?